The Roman Empire is possibly the most important empire in European history, and at its height, it stretched from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south, and from Portugal in the west to Iraq in the east. The Roman Empire expanded from a small city-state on the Italian peninsula to the hegemon of the Mediterranean Sea and the classical world as a whole. Rome eventually began to collapse in the 400s AD and is said to have fallen in 476. But the empire actually survived in the east as the Byzantine Empire until 1453, when Constantinople fell to the Ottomans. The Roman Empire fascinated Europe for most of its history, as many European nations claimed to be the successor to Rome. The idea of Rome has also fascinated alternate historians, with numerous scenarios showcasing what would have happened if Rome survived to the modern day. In today's video, I want to make a scenario similar to these, but instead of focusing on how the Roman Empire survived through millennia, I want to show Rome in the modern day. This is the first video in a series I want to make called Demographic Debriefs, where I showcase influential empires from the past in the modern day. To start, I will give a basic overview of the history of Rome after its peak in this scenario. Rome reached its territorial height in 110 AD after expanding in all directions from the Italian peninsula to reach the borders on this map. In real life, Rome began to decline, but in this scenario, Rome continued to expand. Rome's conquests from 110 to 500 are shown in blue, and these relatively small conquests show how during this time period, Rome had to focus on stabilizing its empire and stop overstretching itself to allow its continued existence. From 500 to 1000, Rome conquers the areas in green by conquering to the Elbe River in Germany, expanding into Arabia, and conquering Ireland and Scotland. From 1000 to 1500, Rome conquers two extremely important areas in Arabia and Persia. Also during this time period, Rome expands into Germanic and Slavic lands, along with Nubia in the south. Finally, from 1500 to 2030, Rome expands greatly by officially annexing the Sahara and conquering the Giant of Russia, along with Scandinavia. In the modern day, Rome stretches from the Arctic Circle in the north to sub-Saharan Africa in the south, and from the Atlantic in the west to the Indus River and Ural River in the east. In the mid-1900s, the Roman Empire renamed itself to Romana. They did this to show how the Roman Emperor had finally become a figurehead, while the Senate had the real political power. The Senate is the federal government of Romana, and it is largely aristocratic in nature, meaning only the very wealthy hold seats in Romania's government. The aristocratic nature continues into the governments of Romania's subdivisions. Romania is divided into 4 Caesarates, which have a large amount of autonomy from the federal government. These Caesarates are then each divided into 5 dioceses, which have less autonomy from the Caesarate than the Caesarate has from the federal government. Finally, each diocese is then divided into 4 provinces, for a total of 80 provinces nationwide. I will now explain each Caesarate in detail. Starting with arguably the least important Caesaret of Barbaria. The name comes from the concept that the Romans called any peoples not in their empire barbarians, and especially used the name to refer to the ancient Germanic tribes that lived north of Rome. Today this name is no longer offensive and is worn with pride by the citizens of Barbaria. Barbarian history with Rome is complicated, as regions like Germania were conquered long ago, but regions like Russia and Nordica were conquered recently, with Russia only officially coming under Roman rule in 1918. Because of this, much of Barbaria still retains their own language and culture, making Barbaria a very diverse part of the Roman Empire. Barbaria has a population of 340.7 million, which is very similar to the United States in real life. Barbaria has an area of 6.72 million kilometers squared. Before it was conquered, Russia was considered the backwater of Europe and was extremely agricultural. Because of this, and its recent introduction to Romania, Barbaria is the poorest region of Romania, with a GDP of 11.59 trillion and a GDP per capita of 34,000. Its GDP per capita is still respectable though, and is comparable to Japan. The capital of the Caesarate is Minsk, which was chosen because of its central location. The largest cities in Barbaria are Moscow, the capital of Russia before its conquest, and one of the largest cities in Romania. Swabia, the largest city in Germany, and Alexia, an important city for trade as it is situated along the Baltic Sea, allowing for the export of Russian goods. Now I will quickly show a map of each diocese of Barbaria. I will only shortly explain the diocese, so feel free to pause the video and look at the map if you want more. Salmaticum is situated on the Baltic Sea and is one of the poorest regions in Romania. It controls a large city of Alexia and the capital of Barbaria with Minsk. Nordica is the northernmost diocese in Romania and has important oil and ore reserves. Germania is an important industrial region for Romania and the only fully Latin-speaking province outside the Roma Caesarate. Russia is a very populous recent conquest by Rome and contains one of the largest cities in Romania, Moscow. Slavica sits at the convergence between the Latin and Greek-speaking parts of the Roman Empire and is important for exports going through the Black Sea. The next Caesarate is Iran in the east of the empire. Iran is the heartland of the ancient Persian empires, such as the Achaemenid Empire and the Parthian Empire. Iran, also known as Persia, was Rome's primary rival for much of its existence. Most of Iran was able to hold out until the 1300s, when Rome conquered Persia in 1318 and Arabia in 1394. The outskirts of Iran weren't conquered until the 1800s, though. Iran has a population of 379.8 million and an area of 6,970,000 kilometers squared. Much of Iran is composed of desert, but the habitable regions are often densely populated. Iran is slightly richer than Barbaria, with a GDP per capita of 39,000 and a GDP of 14.779 trillion. The capital and largest city of Iran is Ragas, which has been the center of Iranian culture for over millennia and is a very important city for Romania. Following Ragas is Ctesiphon, the largest city in Mesopotamia, and it is situated in the cradle of civilization. Zafar is in the south of the Arabian Peninsula and is a city dominated by the Himyarite people. It is important because of its proximity to the Red Sea trade routes. Now for the diocese maps. Persia is the center of many ancient empires, but today is mostly composed of desert, with isolated cities holding most of the population. Media contains the city of Ragas, and therefore making it the center of Iranian culture. Mesopotamia is the area around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and is where human civilization first began. Parthia is on the very edge of Romania, and is one of the poorest regions of the nation. Arabia is very important to Romania for its massive oil reserves and checkpoints on Red Sea trade. The second most populous Caesarate in Romania is Helenia, or the Greek Caesarate. Helenia is the center of the Greek people, language, and culture. Even in the very early days of Rome, much of their culture was based off of the ancient Greeks. Eventually, the Romans surpassed and even conquered the Greek heartland in Anatolia and the Balkans. Even after this conquest, the Greek language was still used alongside Latin in the east of the empire, and even many of the elites in the west spoke Greek. Helenia also controlled the region where the religion of 95% of Romania in Christianity originated. Helenia has a population of 412.7 million and is the densest region of the nation. It has an area of 4,591,000 kilometers squared. Helenia is a very rich region with a GDP of 22.515 trillion and a GDP per capita of 54.5 thousand, which is comparable to the UK in real life. The capital of Helenia is Constantinople, possibly the most strategically placed city in the world and the largest city in Romania, with a metropolitan population of over 25 million. Following Constantinople are Alexandria and Memphis, both extremely large and important cities in the province of Aegyptus. Now for the diocese maps. Caucasia is by far the least populous diocese in Romania, with only 19 million people, and it is situated in the Caucasus Mountains, hence its name. Ethiopia is the furthest south diocese of Romania and holds the southern part of the Nile in what used to be called Nubia. Palestine is situated on the eastern Mediterranean and is important for being the birthplace of Jesus and the first region to adopt Christianity. Hellas is the heartland of ancient Greece and the birthplace of Greek culture. Hellas controls the largest city in Romania, Constantinople. Aegyptus is the most populated diocese in Romania, with nearly 140 million people. It also holds two massive cities in Alexandria and Memphis. Finally, we reach the Caesaret of Roma, the center of ancient Rome, with the famous city of Roma itself. Roma is where the Roman Empire began and contains the regions the empire spread to first. Roma is by far the most important Caesaret, with its massive population, and even more importantly, its massive economy. Roma was a region from which explorers sailed west and discovered the Americas, and is one of the richest regions on Earth. Roma has a population of 486.8 million and an area of 6,364,000 kilometers squared. These are both impressive, but where Roma really shines is in its economy. Roma has a GDP of 34.863 trillion, and its GDP per capita is 74.3 thousand, which is comparable to Denmark. Its large economy is mostly thanks to the Industrial Revolution taking place in this area of the nation, and this remains important today with large technology and manufacturing sectors. The largest city in Roma is of course Roma itself, which is the second largest city in the nation and the capital of the nation. Following Roma are Lutetia and Londinium, both important industrial centers in previously Celtic areas. Now for the diocese maps. Africa is the heart of the ancient Carthaginian Empire, and today it controls much of the Sahara, with its population living in the much more habitable regions along the Mediterranean. Celtica controls the largest island in Romania and was an important region during the Industrial Revolution for its coal reserves. Italia is the center of the nation, with Roma itself, and is also the richest diocese in the nation. Hispania is on the western edge of the nation and is where many explorers who interacted with the Americas were from. Gallia is possibly the most important diocese in Romania, with a large population, and it is where the Industrial Revolution began. Romania is a multilingual nation with many languages spread across many cultures. The two languages are put above the rest: Latin and Greek. Latin is spoken in the west of the empire and has always been the primary language of Rome. Greek is spoken in what used to be the east of the empire and has always been an important language from ancient Greece and throughout all of Rome's history. Almost all Roman citizens are bilingual, with native Latin speakers learning Greek, native Greek speakers learning Latin, and speakers of other languages learning either Latin or Greek, depending where on the empire they live. Romania, as a whole, is the most populous, largest, and richest country on Earth, with no other nation on the same level as them. Romania has a population of 1.62 billion and an area of 21.654 million kilometers squared. The nation's population density is 65.7 people per kilometers, which is similar to Mexico. Romania has a GDP of 83.747 trillion, which is nearly 3 times that of the United States, and has a GDP per capita of 51.68 thousand, which is similar to the UK in real life. Of course, the capital of the nation is Roma. The 10 largest cities in Rome are all massive cities with extreme importance on the world stage. Constantinople is possibly the most strategically placed city on Earth. Rome is the capital of the most powerful nation on Earth. Alexandria was founded by a great conqueror and is the center of knowledge. Moscow used to be the center of Russia and is now the largest outlying city in Romania. Ragas is the center of Persia and the east of the empire. Memphis and Thebes are extremely important cities along the Nile, and Lutetia, Londinium, and Agrippina are all important industrial centers in the west of the empire. On the world stage, Romania borders many African nations in the south, with Aksum being the most important. To the east it borders India, China, Turkey, and Siberia. Rome has a large amount of influence over much of these nations, as well as much of its former colonies in the Americas. For millennia, Romania has been the most powerful nation on Earth, and the world has no reason to believe that this will ever change. Thanks for watching.